In the next two lessons, we're going to look at the gases of the atmosphere. Now, this pie chart represents the relative percentages of the most important gases. So we have the most abundant gas, which is nitrogen, here in green, and then the second most abundant is oxygen, here in red, and then in blue we have argon, and this black line here represents carbon dioxide. Now, I'm going to quote you the standard textbook percentages. That's what you need to know for the GCSE and IGCSE chemistry exams. So we've got nitrogen is at 78%, oxygen is 21%, argon is 0.9%, and then carbon dioxide is at 0.04%. Now, these figures represent the percentages for what we call dry air. That's to say, we're ignoring the presence of water vapour. Now, the percentage of water vapour in the atmosphere, which is normally known as humidity, will change from one place to another, from one time of the year to another, so it's not constant. So there can be quite large changes in the percentage of water vapour. So we actually leave that out of the pie diagram altogether. These percentages represent the contents of dry air. That's to say, that's air without water vapour. Now, before we go on to discuss the properties of these four gases, or the uses of these four gases, I just want to go over a standard experiment which helps us to determine the percentage of oxygen in the air. So you might well be asked about this procedure in an exam. So how are we going to determine the percentage of oxygen? Well, we're going to take a test tube, and inside the test tube we're going to place some iron wool. Now, iron will react with oxygen in the air around it to form iron 3 oxide or rust, but we're going to speed up this reaction by soaking the iron wool in vinegar. And that's going to act as a catalyst which helps to speed up the reaction between the iron wool and oxygen. So we have iron wool. Now you need to take note of the starting level of the water here. Now what you're going to find is, as the oxygen reacts with the iron wool to form iron 3 oxide, the oxygen in the air in the test tube is removed, and the atmospheric pressure outside pushes water up into the test tube to replace the oxygen that's been removed. So after a few hours we'll see something like this, where the starting level was here and the final level was here. That's after all of the oxygen has been removed from the test tube. So we can work out by noticing the change in volume and dividing that by the total volume in the test tube, we can work out the percentage of oxygen that was present in that test tube. And as you can see here, it comes to roughly 1/5 or 20%. So say the water level Okay, now then, let's go back and have a look at some of the uses of these gases. In this lesson I'm going to look at oxygen and argon. The next lesson we'll look at carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Okay, so oxygen, well, the primary use of oxygen is for burning things. Okay, so here we've got a clip from a video on exploding custard. It's actually custard powder which is burning in with oxygen in the air around it, and yeah, oxygen burns things. You might say, well, it's also used for respiration. We need to breathe oxygen, but we actually do exactly the same thing with oxygen. The oxygen is taken into our lungs, into our blood, to the cells in our body, to the mitochondria in those cells, and there the oxygen is used to burn glucose, for example, so that we can obtain energy. So oxygen is quite a reactive gas. It will react with many different substances. It will react with metals to form metal oxides. It will react with non-metals to form non-metal oxides. It will also react with fuels. So commonly when we think about burning, we think about oxygen reacting with fuels to produce energy. So the chemical energy in the petrol that you supply to your car will not be released without oxygen. Likewise, the chemical energy stored in natural gas that you use in your cooker is released when methane reacts with oxygen. The light that is produced by a candle, well, the chemical energy in that candle is released when wax reacts with oxygen in the air around it. So oxygen is a very important gas for us. Now, so what is argon used for? Well, argon is an inert gas, as you know, and that means it doesn't react with anything. So one of its uses was to fill the old incandescent light bulbs. What you have here is a filament through which an electric current is passing. These are usually tungsten, and it gets very, very, very hot, typically over 3000 degrees Celsius. Now, if you were to fill that light bulb with normal air, well, the air would immediately react with that tungsten filament because the air contains oxygen. Now, if we fill it with argon, because argon is inert, well, the argon is resistant. It will not react with the filament, so that's a useful gas with which to fill this type of light bulb. But it's also used in the more recent energy saving light bulbs. Okay, so these are also filled with argon, but the argon's used in a different way in this case. What happens now is that an electric current is passed through the gas and electrons will collide with the argon atoms and excite them. And when that happens, the argon atoms emit ultraviolet light. Okay, what happens then is that the ultraviolet light emitted by those argon atoms then collide with a fluorescent paint which is on the inside of this light bulb. And as that happens, a whole range of different colours are produced by that fluorescent paint, which is interpreted by our eyes as white light. So in the old-fashioned light bulbs, the argon is used to protect the filament from burning. In the new light bulbs, the argon is actually used to emit ultraviolet light, which then collides with fluorescent plate and causes white light to be emitted by that fluorescent paint. Okay, so that's oxygen and argon. The next lesson we'll have a look at carbon dioxide and nitrogen.